friends, what is up and welcome back. Today, as you can tell, we're doing my January wrap-up. I haven't done a wrap-up in so long. I am still using Storygraph, still tracking all of my books. I read 105 last year, which, might I add, is the most I've read in a long time since I got off the internet. So now that I'm back, we'll see how that goes. I have a new kind of way that I'm reading. So I read a Kindle book on my phone or on my Kindle while I'm at work. I have a physical book that I have at home and in my car that I read on like lunches and things like that. And then I always have an audiobook going in my car on my drive to and from work. So I'm reading quite a bit right now. So let me know if you want to see my best books of 2025 or 2024 and my worst books of 2024, because I have 105 to choose from. And I do have some pretty strong opinions on quite a bit of what I read. But today's just going to be my January wrap-up. The first thing I'm going to start out with is The Wrong Score by Knotty. I actually read this entire series in 2024. This is the first one that I've read, or the last book in the series, the first book that I read in 2025. So really enjoying the whole series if you haven't read it. It is a sports romance, so it does revolve around hockey, which has become one of my favorite genres to read. I love like a hockey romance because I love hockey in general. So reading a romance based around that is pretty interesting. But this one follows two characters that we've already kind of been introduced to in the series, but it is the coach of the hockey team as well as a reporter who has come in to kind of investigate and do like little fluff pieces essentially on the group. And he doesn't trust her, she doesn't trust him because she believes that he doesn't like her, but obviously it is, you know, a romance, so they do end up kind of getting together. But the point of it is, or like the divisiveness in it, is that he is much older. So still really liked it. I like Knotty's stuff. I would say not my most favorite hockey like sports romance that I've read, but a very solid series if you haven't read them. We had a visitor that came into my job who was talking about the Liz Tomford novels, and I started off reading Mile High. I don't think that I'd ever attempted to read these. I thought that I had, so when she was talking about it, I was like, oh yeah, like I think I've read them. Wasn't a huge fan, you know, whatever, but was completely wrong. Not the series that I thought it was. This one follows our main character Xander's and our other main character Stevie. Stevie is a stewardess for the airline that Xander's flies on. He is once again a hockey star. And I ate this up. I ate this up so fast. I ate it up so fast, in fact, that I also read Right Move, Caught Up, and Play Along like back to back to back. I believe Play Along had just come out, so I was like trying to pace the series. They all follow different stars in the series. I haven't really been rating books this year, but I know Mile High I would have given like a 4-star. Right Move, Caught Up, and Play Along I would have given 5. Like I just absolutely love them. If you need more like sports romances in your life, would recommend. So Mile High follows, like I said, Xander and Stevie. They are more like on the hockey side of things. Right Move follows our main characters Ryan and Indy. That is more NBA kind of focus, so if you're into that. And then we have another let me pull it up here. Sorry, I have my app open. And then Caught Up is a single dad story. Really like this one as well. I believe this one is baseball, if I remember correctly. Yes, it is. And then Play Along is the 4th one. And that is, once again, the baseball team. So it's hockey, baseball, and the NBA. So really good. You get a little bit of different kind of like tropes, I guess, in all of them. So if you're looking for just like a well-rounded, easy to read, fluffy series, 10 out of 10 would recommend. And then also I believe the 5th one comes out this year, so very excited for that. The next book that I read, I have been seeing this everywhere and I was like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna like this. This is one of those TikTok, Instagram, like even me like not really being in that sphere this year or last year, saw it everywhere and was like, okay, I'm gonna give it a chance, because I really wanted a dark, brooding kind of male character, like definitely morally gray, borderline evil, you know, kind of like hate to love fantasy romance. And if you can't tell which one I'm talking about, it is Quicksilver. I read this and like literally almost lost my mind. Like this was the book that I needed in 2024. I think like I was looking for something like this and I don't know why I didn't read it, but it is by Callie Hart. So this story follows our main character Saris and then the love interest, his name is Kingfisher. Like I said, this is a fantasy romance series. Essentially Saris opens what is a portal to another realm, which is Kingfisher's realm, and he basically takes her hostage and has her performing these tasks to essentially provide protection for his realm. That's like the very, very base of it. I loved this. This was just dark enough to be everything that I wanted, and I love Kingfisher. And if you guys have not, please take a moment. If you have not heard the audiobook narration of this series, or what is going to be the series, like the first book, Kingfisher, oh my God. You would have convinced me to read this book based on the audiobook narration alone. If you haven't read it, I would recommend. This was a very, very high enjoyment value for me. That's kind of how I've been rating and reading books recently. If I'm not enjoying it, I'm gonna DNF it. If I'm loving it, that's all I'm asking for. And this was very, very high on the enjoyment scale. So would recommend. So the next book I read is number 3 in a series of Love and Hockey by Lauren Blakely, and it's The Proposal Play. Lauren has become one of my favorite authors that I think I read in 2024, especially her sports romance. I wouldn't say the writing is the best writing I've ever come across, but I will say for entertainment value, very, very good. This is very open door romance, but based around hockey, which once again had become one of my favorites. This follows her main characters, Maeve and Asher. Maeve essentially is best friends with Asher and wins to help with a like fundraising event, a date with him to go to Vegas. Well, they wake up that following day and they are married, and they're like, okay, we'll just get it annulled, like, you know, just did it for the lulz, whatever. But they end up kind of keeping up the ruse. So this is friends to lovers, which is not normally my favorite kind of dynamic in books, but I ended up really, really loving this one. Like I said, Lauren and her hockey romances, very fluffy, very, like I said, very steamy, very open door, but very, very good on the enjoyment scale. The next books I read back to back, and I wouldn't say that I was the biggest fan of them. It was Powerless and Reckless. This basically follows 2 characters, Peyton and Kai, I believe is his name. This is how much I didn't care for them. So Peyton is what we call an ordinary in this world. So essentially there is a trial that happens, like it's like, I don't want to say televised because it is a fantasy novel, but essentially it is a televised event similar to, I would say, like Hunger Games, where it's like survival of the fittest, but more magical. So people are chosen. There's like the people's champion, which ends up being Peyton, and no one knows that she's an ordinary because they are essentially killed off in this world. So Peyton gets thrown into the ring essentially to try to win without being discovered that she is in fact an ordinary. And the love interest, his name is Kai, he ends up he's one of the princes of the realm, but he is what they call an enforcer, which is essentially the person who goes and kills the ordinary. He like leads the charge for that. Now the issue that I had with this series was, 1, it was really predictable, and 2, it was so poorly written. It was very repetitive, very, I would just say like it's like if she took the Hunger Games and added magic to it, it just seemed, I don't want to call it a ripoff because I think at this point a lot of stories can be very similar and there's nothing wrong with that, but this was just so repetitive, especially the second one. I read the second one right after reading the first one, and I remember texting my friend and being like, this is like night and day from the first one. The first one was enjoyable. Like, it was definitely like a fluffy read. It's more, you know, YA, nothing bad. But reading the second one literally made me want to gouge my eyes out. Like, I was super worried that it was going to put me in a reading slump. There was no storyline whatsoever in the story. It was just incredibly boring as well. Nothing really to like hold on to. So I know that was like a big, like on Storygraph alone, it has like 50,000 reviews, and I don't know why, other than a lot of the ones that I see are pretty poor, but I wasn't a fan, and not just because it's YA, because I've read plenty of YA this year and last year, and it just didn't scratch that itch that I needed. And everybody was like super into it when it first came out, and I was very let down. The next book that I read was definitely a little bit different than what I've read in a while. Not that I haven't read these kinds of books before, but I did read Lost Stars by Claudia Gray, which is a Star Wars book. If you guys have been following me for a while, I was really big into Star Wars. I still am. Like, I do definitely like, you know, like the world itself, but I haven't picked up a Star Wars novel in a long time. Lost Stars I actually did on audiobook, and it follows 2 kids whose names I cannot remember because I'm horrible with names, but they are from the planet Jellucan, and they essentially get indoctrinated into the Empire. And so it follows them going through training and through their careers. One of them ends up joining the rebels after a while, and then one of them, you know, continues with, you know, serving the Empire. So I thought that was really cool, like the juxtaposition of the two of them. Definitely, I would say for the Star Wars books that I read, and especially the audiobook, I thought it was really, really good. And then to go with that, I also read A Crash of Fate. This one follows our main character, Izzy, and her love interest, Jules. This is more of like a, I would say like sci-fi romance kind of thing, but Izzy is a smuggler in this series, and Jules is back on their home planet, and they haven't seen each other in years and years, and she gets a job after being completely heartbroken that takes her back to the home planet that Jules is on. So it's more of a friends to lovers kind of romance, definitely closed door, nothing super steamy, but you get a lot of looks at certain characters or certain species of characters in this book, especially the Hutts, that I was really, really interested in. So that one ended up being like surprisingly good. There's not a whole lot of a story outside of the romance, I would say. You know, essentially Izzy's trying to deliver this package, is unable to deliver it, and it sort of follows like them trying to figure that out on that planet. So there's not a whole lot of like travel or anything like that, but it was just nice to see. Like, I love the romance genre, so to see the romance genre kind of in the Star Wars universe was really, really lovely to me. And then I read Heartstopper Volume 5. Won't go too much into this to avoid spoilers, but this was a great like next installment for me. I've been watching the show and absolutely loving it. I've been like holding out watching the most recent season because I just like don't ever want it to end. And then the next book I read, this is not something that I would normally read. This is a murder mystery thriller kind of thing, and for enjoyment purposes I definitely did enjoy it. It's The Unwedding by Ali Condi. I know I've heard the name Ali Condi before. I am not in the thriller genre whatsoever. But this follows our main character, Ellery, and she goes on what was supposed to be her 20th wedding anniversary trip to Big Sur alone, because she ends up getting a divorce. And while she's there, you know, murder, theft, mayhem ensues. And I thought this was really fun. So I wasn't able to pick up on like who the killer would be, like the backstory. Like it definitely had that moment where I was like, oh my gosh, very enjoyable. Not, you know, not like earth-shattering or anything, but still very, very fun to me. Very enjoyable, very just it wasn't very gripping, I would say, but it had enough of a story to keep me interested. The next book that I read, I was actually really interested in reading and did not know that this was written by this author, but it is Bride by Ali Hazelwood. It is a vampire werewolves romance, which I've never really dabbled in the, you know, kind of in that genre itself. Like I don't read any kind of like vampire romances. I know there's like a whole like monster romance kind of thing that people really like, but Misery is a vampire, and then Lo is the kind of pack leader for the werewolves. And essentially Emery and Lo end up getting married in an attempt to kind of placate what might be like a pending war. The cool thing about this series though is Misery's reason for doing it is searching for her best friend, and I, enjoyment wise, really liked it. So I probably read it in about 2 days. I was really enthralled with it. I thought it was fun. I wouldn't say it's the best piece of literary fiction I've ever read, even in the like romance genre. I imagine a lot of people reading this, even if they're into like vampire, werewolf, kind of like romances, probably wouldn't think it was the most revolutionary either, but it was very good. It was very enjoyable. I would say the ending felt kind of abrupt. There were a couple of things that happened where I was like, I probably could have written that like a little bit better, but who am I to know? Like, I'm not an author. I'm just over here consuming the books to critique them, but it was still very, very enjoyable. So I would recommend. And then the last book that I read in the month of January is A Curse for True Love by Stephanie Garber. And I wish I would not have wasted so much time on this series. So I really liked the Caraval series that she wrote like forever ago when I read them. But this book, I think I would have enjoyed it more, the series, I would have enjoyed it more if it was an adult series. I think that Jax, like without giving too much away, if you've read them, you know, or if you've read the first one. So it still has our same main characters. But I think what this series really needed was more of an adult spin to it. I think like making the characters a little bit darker, a little bit more morally gray, just the romance itself, there was just something lacking about it. And I don't know if it's the way that Stephanie writes, if it just doesn't really like resonate with me or what, but yeah, didn't 100% love it. But yeah, that's all the books that I read in the month of January. Let me know if you've read any of these and like what you thought of them. What's your favorite read for the month? Because I want to start reading like what other people, you know, have been like, hey, I've absolutely loved this. Like I want enjoyment. Like it can be trash, but I just want like the enjoyment factor. So if you've read a book and you've really, really loved it, like you just enjoyed the heck out of it, please let me know down below. But thank you guys so much for watching. I love you so much, and I will see you in my next video.